Hi, Dave.
Hi, Kim.
Hello.
How you doing? I just started the broadcast, so it's started, and just waiting for you to join. We're five
Yeah,
minutes early, of
just
course, and we're welcoming anyone who's joining us early, and we're just checking, making sure everything works.
join call. Join. Yeah, I'm trying it on my pod this morning because I just hang out. Continue. I see
There
my
you
kid.
are. I see your photo.
And I'm
And
sideways.
sideways.
There might be a bit of a delay. There you are.
You don't fool around with it.
I'm in anyway.
You're in. That's awesome, and I don't hear you through the computer yet.
Okay, well, let's hang up.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I can. I can hear you well. Excellent.
I can't go sideways. Oh, I can go sideways. All right. Good morning.
Good morning. Still have a bit of brightness from the windows behind you. Yeah, you
Okay.
can't switch around so you have a different.
Problem. That's the joy, and that's the problem.
Yes.
Here we go. Okay, cheers.
Cheers. Okay, so I've got 10:27. We'll just wait a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Welcome to all of those of you early joiners.
Yes, good morning.
Nice to see you online. How's the weather in Victoria?
We are experiencing the first gray skies in about 10 or 12 days.
Okay.
And rain. But it's nice. And you?
We, after a bit of a gray day yesterday and some rain, we have a nice sunny day today. So
Great.
hopefully that continues.
Yeah.
Not
For
sure
the
how
long
many.
weekend.
Yes, not sure how many cycling days we have yet. That would be motor cycling, and hope to get out a few more times on the bike before I have to shut her down for the winter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, I've been on my bicycle every day. That
Good
would
for
be
you.
human,
Good for
not
you.
motor power.
Yes, yes, yes. I got 10:29, and very shortly we will. As soon as that hits 10:30, I'll kick it off. Good morning and welcome everyone. My name is David Corey and I've got my colleague Kim Cairns with me, and today we're going to talk about independence as the sixth program in our 15-part series on the various EQ competencies that belong to the MHS model of emotional intelligence, originally created by Dr. Reuven Bar-On. So thanks for joining us, and welcome from wherever you happen to be viewing this video from. We are going to talk about independence. We're going to be talking about the problem within the problems that are created or that arise out of a lack of independence. We'll talk about some of the issues that are created when someone has maybe an overuse of the competency of independence, and we'll talk about some of the potential solutions to those issues. We'll talk about what it looks like to coach someone who is struggling with independence issues. We'll talk about training, and then we'll get into your questions. And again, your questions at any time, you can feel free to type those in. They will appear to us, and I will go ahead and read those questions off, and we'll take those questions. We'll start with a bit of a presentation, and then we'll move into questions. So just to start off, Kim, I'm just going to do a quick intro, and then I'm going to turn it right over to you. Independence is one of those competencies that comes with life. We start out completely dependent in life. Without our mothers, our fathers, our significant caregivers, we would perish. And so it's critical that we are dependent for some time, and then we spend our lives becoming more and more independent. Carl Jung calls this process, or this journey, individuation. And we become more and more in touch and in tune with ourselves, and more in control of our own lives. I just want to quickly turn it over to you, Kim, just to comment on what it's like coaching around independence. What's that like?
Well, I think that I'll come at it from a couple of different perspectives. One of the things that comes up often for me in coaching is people dealing with their own kids. We do live in this age of what we call helicopter parents, who are very involved in their children's lives, even past the point of those children being children. And I think that one of the real important parts is helping those kids develop independence at an early age. So I talked to people that were coaching around this whole notion of parenting is like a gradual release program, really. What we're wanting to do is support, nurture those children while they're really young, and then we begin a process of gradually letting them test out the world on their own. And so encouraging folks to set up those situations where kids can experience things in the world on their own and sort those problems out on their own in a gradual kind of process. So very similarly, in the workplace, we have people that are in leadership positions that have a lot of pressure on them to perform and produce results, and that pressure can often get put on the people that are actually doing the work, so there can tend to be a process of helicopter leadership, whereby they're micromanaging those situations and not letting people develop those outcomes on their own and stumble around and make some mistakes. And really, from a leadership position, if I'm wanting to lead a solid team, I'm wanting those people to be able to think independently, not to have to turn to me at every turn in the path and say, what do I do now? So again, it's very important to do a gradual release program, right from onboarding of new staff, right on through their working careers. So it's an important aspect to keep in mind as a leader, that what we're really trying to do is encourage that independent thinking, not at the expense of the interpersonal relationships and the reality testing that must be part of that team of workers too. But we need to stress independence as much as we need to stress teamwork.
Great, thanks, Kim. And we often talk about the similarities and the parallels between leadership and parenting. And of course, just like the parent wants their children to grow in their independence and eventually, take off out of the nest and soar up into the skies. and not just sort of push them out of the nest and have them fall splat on the ground. We also want that with our employees as well, that we are thinking about ways of involving them and handing off and delegating responsibility and authority for tasks as well to assist in that growing independence. Now, I can't think about independence without thinking about my own personal journey as the youngest of four siblings, and all those parents that I seemed to have growing up. I didn't have any trouble getting suggestions, advice, direction from many adults in my young life, and one of the things that it did was it kind of prevented me from developing my own independence. And so one of the big things that I did, and certainly it's a very common story and experience, and that is I had to pack up a backpack full of clothing and take off across the sea, and I ended up in Europe, and I ended up learning a second language and getting a really unique job in a unique place, and having all kinds of great experiences. But part of that for me was really, getting away and having no one to rely on except myself for the first time, and that was really important to me and my growth and development. And I know you have a similar story, Kim. So tell us a little bit about what that meant to you in your life.
Well, I think, key to my independence was probably my maternal grandmother, who, in my early years, she died when I was 8 years old, but that 8 years was fabulous with her, because during that time she was retired and traveling all over the world and sending me postcards from various spots on the globe. So very early on I developed an interest in the notion that there was a world outside of Calgary, Alberta. And she would return from these trips and talk about the great places she'd been. And so very early on, I had in my mind that I wanted to explore that world too. So like yourself, the minute I graduated from grade 12, I threw my stuff in my pack and took off to Europe for 5 months. And that was really an important part of my developing independent skills. Just stepping right out there into territory that I didn't know anything about, and doing it in the midst of all of my friends enrolling in university right off the bat. So I don't really know how that's worked out necessarily for me. I think it's been a grand life, but it was very important for me to do something independently, and to continue to do something independently throughout my life. So so travel played a key role in it, as well as a strong mentoring component early on.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. Now, Kim, what if you don't have that opportunity to have the experiences that we were privileged enough to have? What if you don't grow your independence? What if you are still quite timid, or you just don't feel comfortable with exercising your independence? What is that? How does that look in the workplace? What if you're a team member, or in fact you're a manager and you struggle with independence? What is that? How does that show up?
Well, I think what we often end up doing is having people try a series of small steps. That those small steps being something outside of their usual default responses in situations. So in a situation where they might be seeking further guidance from their supervisor, to take a look at it and say, what could I do if I actually made a decision on my own here? And I think that what helps is not potentially earth-shattering decisions right off the bat, but there are lots of small decisions that get made every day in the workplace. So to try out something from a different perspective than my usual default response in a situation. And then take a look and assess how that's working out for me. Okay, how was that actually to make that decision independently on my own? How did it work out for me? How did it work out for those that are working around me? And then gradually develop more and more ability to take a look at situations and know that there are always a number of choices and perspectives in that. And that I, as an independent human being, can make a selection from those choices and then proceed.
Can you be too independent, Kim?
Well, absolutely. As we know with emotional intelligence, I mean these 15 competencies really are very much like muscles, and I like to think of them as well utilized muscles, sometimes perhaps underutilized muscles, and overutilized. So, you know, when we're looking at it, if I'm really strong in independence and I score somewhat lower in empathy, that's probably not a really good combination. And if I add in a bit of a lower score in reality testing, that's really danger bay territory. Because I'm making a lot of decisions on my own, I'm proceeding forward, but I'm not really checking out how that's working out for other folks. And I'm not inquiring about what's going on for them. So again, it's about that balance of those muscles. Don't overextend that one. Keep in mind the other muscles that need to be getting a daily workout as well.
Right. And interestingly, that overuse or that overabundance of independence is really sort of the classic old school dominant style of leadership, isn't it? Yeah, where we've got people who are thinking that that they should have the answers to everything, that they should, you know, go off and make the decisions for the organization, and that there's very little collaboration with an overabundance of independence, and it really serves as a limiting factor in organizations. Whereas we want to collaborate, we want to bring decisions, and we want to bring issues and challenges to the team so that the team can sort through this, and so that we have many minds working on a particular issue. In that overabundance of independence, that dominance, hierarchical, autocratic style of leadership, you're extremely limiting what can be done. And as I am very fond of saying, it's an old saying, it's a wonderful old saying, and alone we're limited in what we can accomplish, and together we're unlimited in what we can accomplish. And so while we need to encourage independence, and we need to develop our own independence and be able to rely on our own competencies, etc., we also want to be able to bring that to the team, to bring that to an interdependence. And you know, I was leafing through Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People book the other day, and I noted that I had forgotten in his model. He starts out at the very bottom of his personal effectiveness model with dependence. So it's right there. Dependence is the start. Then you become independent, then you become interdependent. So he has those 3 phases in his growth and development model, which I had forgotten, and I found very interesting. And of course, people often ask, well, you know, why would we have independence as a goal when interdependence is really, you know, where we want to get to? And of course, the answer is that you have to have something to bring to the party. You have to have something to bring to the table. You, as a team player, you need to people need to know that you're bringing everything that you can bring, and that includes your independence. So bring that independence to the team, and then you can have that real interdependence, which is where synergy happens, and synergy is able to be expressed. So Kim, what would you say to those people who are perhaps overusing their independence, and maybe sort of feeling like a bit of a traditional leader, and they kind of like to go into their office, shut the door, and make those big decisions? How do you coach someone like that?
Well, again, I think it's about taking a look at a situation where they could try a totally different approach. And again, I always encourage people to take these, you know, smaller, more baby kind of steps initially when they're trying out a behavioral change. So it's about picking a situation where they normally would go into their office, stew a bit, make some notes, doodle on their pad, and come out with a solution. To take a look at that as an opportunity to put something different out to the team. As in, okay, here's the situation, here's the problem, here's the issue we're facing. And what I really want is all of your thoughts around how to approach this. And then we'll take a look at who's going to do what when we end up selecting a solution. So to take a totally different approach to a smaller problem and see how that works out. And it's risk-taking, and it's uncomfortable. People don't feel comfortable with it because they just want to go with their default response. But so again, it's about taking a look at those situations as opportunities to change my own behavior too. Here I am as an old-style leader, constantly encouraging people to change their behaviors. Probably a very effective way to help make that happen is if I'm changing my own behavior. And people will pay attention right away if I'm not just issuing commands and actually seeking their involvement in decision-making and problem-solving.
Yes, and just to show how interconnected this model is, I just want to talk for a moment about the interconnectedness between independence, which is one of the competencies belonging to what we call the self-expression composite scale, and some of the other scales, particularly the self-perception composite scale. The self-perception composite scale, if you recall, consists of self-regard, self-actualization, and emotional self-awareness. And really, there's such a relationship between self-regard, whether you view yourself as a competent, confident individual, or whether you view yourself as someone who is less competent and not so confident. These are going to determine the amounts of independence you're going to be able to demonstrate. And sometimes we need to sort of connect those when helping people to develop their independence and talk about their self-regard at the same time, how they view themselves. And as we've discussed in previous programs, there are all kinds of interconnections here between these 15 very distinct competencies, which are a little bit like, as we've said, an orchestra. These are instruments in an orchestra, and they have to blend well together. They have to play well together in order to create beautiful music. And if they are out of balance, as Kim says with the muscle analogy, then you don't get the most effective outcomes. And so what we're talking about here with independence is we're talking about the kind of independence that really has something to offer to relationships, to teams, to organizations, and yet not so independent that they're separate and apart, they're a loner, they're off in their office with the door closed. That would be an example of kind of an over-reliance on this competency of independence. So Kim, just looking at some questions coming in right now, I've got a question here. What about older adolescents and their seeming reluctance to become independent? What suggestion would you have for a parent in that situation, Kim, who's got maybe an older adolescent or even a young adult in their 20s who seems like they're setting up their lifelong home in the basement? What would you say to that parent, Kim?
Well, I think automatically I would joke with them at first about, isn't it a shame that we didn't have more independence conversations as your child was growing up? But it's important now to sit down and start to talk about that notion with your adolescent or child that's in their early 20s. And it's about initiating that subject, really, and about the importance of it in life, and that it's been grand having them at home, and now it's time for both of us to venture off in these new stages of our life. So it is talking about ages and stages, having that kind of conversation, and inquiring about where they're at with their planning for their life, and if there are no obvious plans in place, then it's time to introduce that notion that that's actually going to be a requirement for continuing to have food, clothing, and shelter provided on a 24-hour-a-day basis. That there's going to need to be an exploration of what they're actually going to do with their life, and again, it's about maintaining that dialogue of inquiry back and forth about how things are working.
I've also heard, Kim, that that you shouldn't do something for a child that the child can do themselves. Is there truth to that?
And absolutely, and I think that that's something that is really important even in early parenting, right? I mean, as much as we're absolutely responsible for those young lives in that 0 to, I don't know, let's say 3 or 4, because then there's some obvious kind of letting go and individuation happening. But from the very beginning, yes, if there's something that that child can actually do, then it's important to sit there and watch that child kind of struggle through that a bit. Whether that's, uh, picking up a toy or recovering from a bit of a stumble, those are very important parts in that development of that notion that I am capable. I do have capacity. And that's what we want to develop in our kids, I'm sure.
And Kim, I've heard you say, and maybe you could elaborate a little, on involving people in decisions that matter. This is, I've heard you say it many times. It's really a great suggestion. But tell us a little bit more about, what kinds of decisions matter, and why would I involve either an employee who struggles with independence or a child who struggles with independence? How do I involve them in that decision?
Well, I think it's about what we're wanting to develop, no matter whether it's our children or our employees, is that notion that they're actually contributing to the situation, that they're not just going through the motions at somebody else's direction. And I think, for me, I do talk about that a lot because it was one of the things that I admired most in an early leader that I had the pleasure of working for, was that person putting me in positions where I was able to make decisions that counted. There was actually a consequence from those decisions. And I stumbled and didn't necessarily make really great decisions. But that's where that leader stepped in and said, okay, so some mistakes were made here. What can we now do to address those mistakes? That's how we develop those skills to be able to work through complex situations and know that there's going to be directions taken, and then we're going to readjust as we go through that journey because we're encountering different circumstances. So that's where we develop that capacity for that kind of thinking, is being put into, given the responsibility of making decisions that count, and experiencing the joy of when that works out well, and also experiencing it's not always going to work out really well, and we can recover from that. So I think as a leader, it's important for me to be able to figure out where all of my team is at as individuals and help orchestrate their journey through that process.
Excellent, excellent information. Thanks, Kim. Now, here's a question, and it has to do with culture. What's the role of culture in the development of independence? Kim, you have thoughts on that? And if not, I'll try and weigh in on this one, but I'll let you have a first crack at it.
Well, I think to a degree, I mean, what comes to my mind immediately, and this is, I'll just be kind of quick and general about this, is having just returned from a couple of months in Botswana, seeing the importance of culture to all of those Botswana that we talked to, and by culture, it's extended family, it's village, it's certain ways of operating that have been in place for a long time, and that being valued, and yet at the same time by some of the younger people in the culture being a bit bristled at, because that involvement in that culture takes away from them being independent too. There's almost too much interdependence for them at times. An expectation of having to attend a lot of family functions on a really regular basis. And that's at the expense of them independently doing what they want to do in their lives. So, I think we all face struggle in our cultures for a variety of reasons, but that's the thing that leaps to my mind immediately, is that, and that struggle was spoken about by a lot of different individuals. So I think it's, with regard to culture, it's about taking a look at what is culturally significant and important, and how much we want to partake of that and contribute to that, and what other directions do we want to go in as individuals as well in a changing world.
I was thinking of the same thing, Kim, and really, I think that there are many cultures where family is really central and really important. And of course, I would say, based on my travels, less so in North America, where we have this idea of the rugged, the classic idea of the or notion of the rugged individualist, and that's classic throughout literature and throughout history. However, in those cultures where family and that real interconnectedness is reinforced, then absolutely there's going to be a bit of a tug between independence on the one hand and that real kind of dependence on the other hand. And I remember some of those conversations regarding family obligations, and so the important thing would be then for individuals to notice when culture, when family obligations, traditions, or whatever, when those are really impeding and causing someone to be less effective. And then, of course, it would be up to that person, as we always suggest, is to making tiny little changes. We don't want people to say, cut themselves off from their family in order to develop their independence. We don't want to create additional issues or problems for people, but we do want people to grow into their independence. We want people to be comfortable with their competence and their competence, and we want people to really be able to rely on themselves and know what they bring to the table in any given situation and any set of circumstances. And so, we are not in any way saying that culture is bad or wrong. In fact, it is because of our exposure to various cultures in the world that we've been thinking very deeply about these issues. How does culture support the development of emotional intelligence skills? How does culture perhaps at times act as a barrier in terms of the development of emotional intelligence skills? So these things are very much at the forefront of our minds, particularly when we're designing programs and we're designing courses and initiatives. This incredibly unique insight into these cultures and how, again, these cultures either support the development of emotional intelligence skills or act as barriers to the development of emotional intelligence skills. So really absolutely fascinating, and as many of you know, Kim and I have had this unique experience of being in Botswana for 2 months at a stretch. We've been there before, and we'll probably go there again. And really sort of thinking more and more about these issues related to culture. So just we've got 2 minutes left, Kim. What are some of your some of the things that you hope people take away from our 30 minutes about independence?
Well, again, Dave, I think really what it comes down to is just recognizing the importance of independence and recognizing the importance of that independent thought, that let's not be influenced by what we think people might think about our statements. I think that it's so important to be able to articulate what's going on for me in an independent way. And sometimes that's going to be pretty uncomfortable because the rest of the people around the table are going to have some different perspectives. And I think that I can learn from that too. It's not that my thinking is necessarily correct, but it's important for me to be able to put it out there and engage in that dialogue. That's where real learning takes place. So understanding the importance of independence in terms of learning from others.
Yes, and it was a real barrier that we've learned in some cultures, just what other people think. And Eleanor Roosevelt, my favorite quote about what other people think, she said, "What other people think is none of your business." And really, when we keep that in mind and keep that front and center, that's going to help us to grow our independence and to come into our own and know what we like and what we want and what we need, and be able to express that. So thanks very much, everyone. Thanks to you, Kim. I hope that that this has been helpful for you, our discussion of independence. And again, I'm David Corey, my colleague Kim Cairns with the Emotional Intelligence Training Company. I hope that that you come back and join us for future programs. And for now, and until next time, we're going to say goodbye. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye for now.